Hello readers, here we are again with YouTubes. Anyway, Quirky Characters, that's the title of this one. It was first performed on May the 16th, 2018 at the Cottage Project, 16 Chapel Street. That's on the A6 in Belper, just opposite the bus station. Derbyshire LGBT Plus launched Golden Rainbows. It's a social support group for older people who identify as gay. We meet on the third Wednesday of each month between 1 and 3 o'clock. A free car park is available behind the cottage. It's free to come in and there are free refreshments. You'll get to enjoy Terry's delicious sandwiches at all meetings. In this short film about the oddbods who inhabit my novel, Quirky Chicken, I'll attempt 10 distinctive voices. Hopefully this will bring to life the quirky characters who were all inspired by real people I've known personally. They were all warped by the vicious homophobic cruelty and bigotry which has blighted the lives of so many gay people. There's a good selection here, existing in a subterranean underworld, taking shelter in their twilight existence. Monsters, clowns, the mundane, the pretentious, the pompous, the centred and the sneering, the common and the crude. After living in Detroit, Belper seemed like a quiet conservative backwater. In 1965, the nearest gay scene for a non-drinker, such as myself, was located at the Derby Turkish Baths. That's about 10 miles away. Belper was a small mill town in the 1960s, and the only gay venue was the home of an old-fashioned elderly man who hosted an open house for secretive, repressed visitors. They were all warmly welcomed into his picturesque cottage, any time, day or evening, you're always welcome. Anonymous men were treated to cups of tea, cakes, friendly conversation, and, oh yes, and the occasional massage in Jasper's bedroom. He resided in a maze of narrow lanes which climbed up the steep rise of the Derwent Valley. This gentle and kind gentleman of, alas, repellent aspect was also known as the Belper Crone. His penetrating leer, it reminded me of the old witch in Disney's Snow White. He was in fact a bent, humped, effeminate, gangling, toothless old queen, presiding over the comings and goings of shy, shadowy types, in and out of his quaint old cottage. To the best of my knowledge, at that time, it was the only safe way to meet other gay men in that conservative community. Well, I felt comfortable anyway in this primitive Victorian kitchen. Over the mantelpiece, I'll never forget, over the mantelpiece there was a brass plate bearing a few, well, trite words, you know. As I recall, I can recall them, and I can see his nodding head and hear his squeaky croak.
Make new friends with Keith the Owl. One is silver, the other gold.
We said that me, I'm never quite sure what it is. Anyway, between 1963 and 1976 I returned to the UK each summer or an annual holiday for as many weeks as I could afford, really. And in 1965, as a 19-year-old, I'd been away from my beloved Derbyshire for 18 months and returned to a quaint world. Oh, it was lovely. Redolent with childhood nostalgia, smells, sounds, and the sights of scruffy folks crowded into picturesque nooks and crannies. Well, after the sterile existence in a well-scrubbed United States, I was fascinated by the friendliness of crooked oddities who constantly addressed each other as Duck. Detroit offered nothing like the variety of oddbodies interbred over generations from mining stock. I felt I'd arrived in a fairy tale world of curiosities resembling toads, goblins and gnomes, more medieval than 20th century clean-cut youth, American youth, more grim, that's grim with two M's, than US glitz and glamour. Here the crooked, coal-encrusted indigenous, they seem to be older, uglier, and have more character, making them, all much more interesting. I recall wandering around Ripley Market, pondering these quirky contrasts all those years ago. I came upon one store which specialised in sweets, chocolates, and all manner of confectionery in a cacophony of trivial chatter. "Humbug," said the man behind the counter. He did a quick funny wriggle with dancing shoulders. He'd two stumps instead of hands. "Tuppence duck," he said.
"Ah, Fred wants it, you know,"
replied his customer.
"No teeth, but he can still suck. Thanks, Duck." "How's your mam?" "Bit better today, Duck. It's been a fortnight since she took bad."
Oh, Duck," said the ancient customer.
"And you with no hands? Oh, I think you're a brick, Duck, I do, Duck."
This was a magical experience, made all the more magical observing this commonplace exchange dominated by the one word duck. The old hag's nose seemed to meet with her chin, giving a sort of witch-like appearance. Her cackling inappropriate comments, highlighting a serious disability, well, it made a contrast to the stallholder whose cushy, caring voice seemed to blend with a downy personality. This ductile chap, known only as Duck, made an immediate impression on me. Somehow it made me feel safe and secure. In this moment, a lifelong friendship started with plump, cosy Duck, who was always kind and considerate. Eventually, I was invited back to meet Mrs. Duck and the duckery, just around the corner from Ripley Marketplace. It was just Duck and Mrs. Duck. There was no Mr. Duck. Occasionally, they were visited by a robin. It hopped onto the window and Duck says, "Hey up, ma'am. Look, it's me dad. It's me dad come back." Encouraged by visits anytime, I could just go, just walked in. That was the custom in working class Ripley, you just walked in. And I saw two large eggs with faces deeply reposing into a cosy sofa, and formed the impression that they'd been sitting there forever. Each face wore a smile of welcome. Both fat faces were devoid of a single wrinkle, which made me wonder about the age of the mam Duck. Over the long years of friendship, Duck never changed. He'd always looked the same. He was just Duck. The mam egg, quite small. She cocked her legs up, she couldn't quite reach the floor. She spoke first.
It's nice to see thee, Duck. Are you all right then, Duck?
And the duck egg appeared to do a quick wriggle with his dancing shoulders and his flapping stumps.
Shall you have a cup of tea, Duck? Put kettle on, ma'am. No, Duck. I've just sat down. You put kettle on, Duck.
All right, ma'am. I'll put kettle on. I looked around. I said, "Oh, it's really nice. You've made it nice. So very cosy and comfortable." Well, the duckery, I suppose it was fixed somewhere inside a time warp. In this case, possibly mid-1930s, something like that. You've got to remember, it's 1965 we're looking back here. Everything was soft and cushy. The conversation in this room was all ductility, well matched to the occupants, mild and downy. It became a favourite place for me. In this old-fashioned feathery room, I felt cushioned from the hard knocks of life. Nothing nasty or hurtful ever came from Duck. Friendly, podgy Duck. At worst, on the occasions in which he did criticise, he'd begin with his characteristic wiggle and dancing shoulders and the one word, myself, like the subject of Annie Oakes at the corner shop. Myself. I think she's a bit dear, don't you think so, ma'am? She is, Duck. Them eggs were sixpence cheaper in town. She takes advantage. She knows I can't walk far. The conversation continued to touch on similar inanities, which included a dripping tap which Fred, the neighbourly fixer, had promised to fix last year. It was still dripped. And there was an unpleasant character in a popular soap on telly who was, according to Mrs. Duck, nasty. He's really nasty. No need to be like that. It's upset our Duck, anti our Duck. It's upset you, anti, yeah. These trifles amuse me. Concerns about a fictitious character on television, someone who doesn't actually exist, and an endless stream of minutiae. Well, it irritated some people, but it had a calming effect on me. The Ducks were warm, generous, and undemanding. Quaint chatter was balmy and mildly entertaining. I was always happy in the duckery. Years later I asked Duck if he'd mind appearing in one of my novels. Yes, assuring him that his disability and sexuality would never ever be mentioned. He and Mrs. Duck were flattered. They loved seeing themselves in Scruffy Chicken and my first gay novel, Lost Lad. It's interesting, you know, there was only one time that we found out that Duck actually admitted his sexuality to anybody, and that was to Marjorie. This is the lady that used to look after me when I was a little boy. I introduced them, and one day Duck says to Marjorie, this is according to what Marjorie told me, Duck says, "Marjorie, I've got something to tell you." "Yes, Duck, what is it?" "Well, you know, like what Narvel and Terry is." "Yes, Duck." "Well, I'm saying..." "Nay, Duck." Of course she knew. She knew years later when we told her. Anyway, less lovable than the Ducks were several snobbish, quirky characters in my novels. Collectively I call them the nodding heads. They wouldn't touch Duck with a barge pole, I'll tell you. In fact, I was instructed never to mention creatures from the lower orders. This was the elite retinue, or entourage if you want to call it that, who followed around and adored Claude Hoadley and his number 2, Hilary Raymond Hawley, also known as HRH. I remember one particular incident in Nottingham's Flying Horse Bar when Mr. Hoadley was addressing his admiring audience in refined tones of royalty, beautiful round vowels. He'd just finished announcing the new floating pirate radio stations. You probably recall those in the 1960s, Radio Caroline and all that, as an affront to good taste. And he expressed horror that the Beatles had been honoured with an MBE. Nincompoops! Spitting feathers, he barked. When a strange development took place, I became mesmerised. Oh, no, wait a minute. Hawley, let me just put you in the picture. Hawley and Hoadley and a few of the others, the nodding heads, after a few drinks, they could get a bit silly and become quite camp. On this occasion, they went a bit further than that. I became mesmerised by the ornate body language of this pretentious troupe of elegant Derby queens, moving about in front of the bar, parading and vaunting, reinforcing their social superiority with every sickening gesture, the royal wave, for example. Hands on hips, small dainty steps. All the nodding heads appeared to be smiling, sneering, progressing slowly in an etiquette-laden mince across the floor, accentuating, of course, their high social position. In Hilary Raymond Hawley alone, I'd never seen a more affected, effeminate man. I remember it so well. Now you see, this scruffy chicken, as I was then as a 19-year-old, I was a one-time, fully paid up macho youth, a one-time mate of solid working class lads, who marched across Ena Marketplace with gritty gait. That was me. Well, anyway, on this occasion, as I say, I was utterly repelled when the big soft Hawley emitted an aristocratic giggle. And he flourished his silk handkerchief in front of his lord and master, the great Hoadley, made an elaborate bow. It was all so artificial, all so formal, so well arranged, so well choreographed, really. What did it remind me of? It was something. I'd seen all this somewhere recently. Where, when, what? And then it came to me. Marie Antoinette! I'd seen this film recently, 1938 film, full of toffs and fops, full of the exaggerated stylized elegance of the 18th century. Of course, it was the minuet. It was the one scene which really revolted me when all these pampered ponces began to move in the most affected manner. A slow, stately dance, here and now. The Derby camp appeared to move in a... They were doing their minuet. They seemed to move in a coordinated pattern dance in three-quarter time to the dignified strains of Bach, all around Claude Hoadley. Perhaps a bow here, a curtsy there, in this impromptu ballroom in front of the Flying Horse Bar. A nauseating display after the style of the worst affected 18th century French dancing. Well, now, we change from the elite, we descend into the gutter. Yes. I once knew a common little queen who felt compelled to share his lewd experiences with, wait for it, with his outraged harridan of a mother. He told his mum everything that he'd done. Olive Tonks, you know, she always reminded me of old Mother Riley. Well, we join them sitting in front of the fire in a tiny old-fashioned kitchen. Mischievously, her wayward son, Simon, speaks of an adventure of the previous evening. "Hey up, man. Chesterfield's dead wrong.
Not safe for a queen like me.
Oh, very sharp was Olive. What is it this time?
Well, it's like this, man. Last night, two big strapping toughs grabbed me.
Oh dear, how bloody awful.
Oh, it were that, it was. They insulted me, man. One says,
You look like a randy tart. And other one says, What's it going to be then? Is it going to be this or this? Well, the second clenched fist, equally as menacing, was clearly made to represent this yob's aroused manhood.
oh, it were terrible, man. Them big brawny lads, all muscle. They dragged me to that lavatory next to Crooked Spire, bent me over bog. Oh, they pushed me head right in bowl. They did. Oh, they banged me summat awful. They banged me summat rotten, one after other, straight in. No manners, no ceremony, just brute force and ignorance, and there's me, an innocent, helpless little queen, with me head in bog.
Simon cocked his head and twinkled at Olive, relishing the wind-up. He knew he was driving her up the wall.
Oh, ma'am, they were abusive as well, adding insult to injury.
What did they say? Spat out Olive, sharply rising to a tantrum.
One says,
You're as bent as that bloody spy, you common cow.
and other said,
Come out! I've had long enough. You've had long enough. It's my turn to ram into that scrubber.
oh, ma'am, I felt so ashamed. No respect for me. They treated me like a spunk rag, they did. But, hey up, ma'am, I will say this. And they were nice. They said, and, hey, you've given us a good time, lass. Pull up your knickers, lass. I bet you feel a slut.
Now Olive, a stalwart of the Pentecostal church, ever quoting Leviticus, was now in a rage of indignation.
I should think you did feel a slut. I'd have kicked and scratched him. I notice you didn't much struggle, did you? No, you should be ashamed. I don't know who you take after. I don't. I hated sex myself. They told me I was going to see bloody stars, and yet when he come on from Boozer, all I saw was your dad's big, great fat beer belly. That's what you are. You're a bloody beer baby. He stunk of beer. Oh. He said to me,
Spread me legs, woman, I want me conjugal rights.
well, he were at least a proper man. Look at thee, sitting knitted. More lass than lad. Are you listening? Put that bloody knitting down, you little puff. You know for a loose bitch.
Well, these presentations of assorted characters from deepest Derbyshire have got more in common than you think. They're intended to amuse, but in fact they are all on the cusp of tragedy, belonging to a damaged underworld of crones, queens and social climbing snobs of the 1960s. With the help of legislation, enlightened education and supportive charities like Derbyshire LGBT+, gay people today are far less extreme and less isolated than the secretive, warped underclass who inhabited my world half a century back. Well, cheerio for now.